there's we got a spot. Yeah, we should have a spot right here. Just throw it underneath. Thank you. Well, you can
Anybody not? Out of the whole profession, you're torturers, pimps, planners, buyers, and penal criminals across the world best solution, and is the most legitimate. Reducing male population was a threat. It would be reckless to spend space, resources, and energy alive in prisons, all property, resources confiscated from men, and supervision. Property at least above 15 should probably drop to the age 40, but that's how things should be. Expectancy without men. 130 years at legal guidance, we know how an anonymous feminist blogger explains the benefits of assist males. This describes and feminized bodies are devalued, femicide to limit the population, no control over property, excluded from the political and betrayed by systems of governing barrier and five. Representation of political structures and processes that result in multiple structural, functional, political factors that vary different social context, nature, demography, environment for women's participation, political discussed identify without putting the current towards creating enabling women participation in women in mainstream development cannot automatically as a political system public-private divide remains a foundation of democracy's normative non-political and to explore the political nature of private liberal theory is inherently subject to both. They were dislocated to play political roles on male terms. And violence should be understood as a continuum of women harassment, sexual assault, all of these forms of violence has been constructed as an expectation that violence against women represents war on women or bodies. Violence against affects the way women view themselves. Silence. These are being beaten in prison and slavery. Peace does not describe ethnic, racial, religious, sexual risk factor as being to describe the conditions of our lives as peace is to deny sexual terrorism. We are as limited groups of men consider war. Violence seems natural. This is politically constructed to silence women. The appropriation of women's bodies, politically constructed reality. Women's bodies have become objects with dominance or communicated objects through which men's honor is attained. Objectification of women is universal. When one country wants to communicate to another country that is superior, it rapes, tortures the inferior country's women. The possessive and intentional sexual victimization of women communicates a message of dominance and ownership, the physical territory of the political struggle over female subordination to women's bodies. And this violence is universal but not monolithic. Status quo patriarchal domination relies on attempting to place women in neat categories as a tool for policing bodies. Transgendered women experience a unique form of this violence. Only the imagined implementation of the affirmative can challenge these standards of acceptable femaleness and femininity. Serrano and 7 transsexual women are often nulled out to bear the brunt of our culture's fascination with the demonization of transgenderism as a subject for feminist critique. Traditional sexism shapes popular assumption about transsexual women and why so many people become women by the world, examining why so many different facets of our society have set out to dehumanize trans women. I hope to show that we are ridiculed and dismissed not merely because we are transgender binary norms, but rather because we choose to be women rather than men. Examining the society-wide disdain for trans women also brings to light an important aspect of sexism, that it targets people not only for their femaleness but also for their expression of femininity. In a world where femininity is so regularly dismissed, no form of gender expression is more suspect than transgender expressions of femininity, and suggesting a world without men opens up space to conceive feminist lawmaking that construction and non-patriarchal challenges status prudence. That is the first step to deal with gender-based violence. In 97, feminist theory and political existence unharmed by patriarchy. Feminists drew into the possibilities of patriarchal law and of a non-patriarchal legal system. Feminist utopian novels and relationship between law and gender create a fictional space that displaces the patriarchal reality. Women authors imagine what the lives of women everyone could be like if we were free from discrimination by presenting renders an alternative in the status quo. This journey of the imagination helps dispel ignoring any irrationality of everyday reality. Feminist utopian fiction also exposes the fictions of legal patriarchy by projecting a utopian vision for the current thinking. Authors of feminist utopian fiction use the device of the outsider's view to show the horror of rape and other sexual violence. Women's utopian fiction offers far-reaching visions for changing women's lives. And feminist utopianism reconceptualizes the idea of utopias from seeking a perfect, absolute, and unchanging world to focus on the process of creating a better future that are constantly revising and responding to structural concerns. Therefore, the process of the implementation of the affirmative sparks a reformation of the system away from status quo patriarchal control. McKenna in 1. The notion of utopia utopia as perfection is a dead concept. It tends to ignore the issues of race, class, and gender. It allows for no change. As soon as we appeal to the conventional concept of utopia, we find that utopia is alive in people's longing, their belief that change is possible, and their willingness to act. It is all too easy for even the most progressive movement to foreclose processes that construct an image of utopia as historical telos. This means that we are not in a position to make absolutist claims, but rather to form hypotheses which are subject to change. We must be willing to change. The recognition that change is necessary allows for tolerance and human development, a more relaxed sense of human interaction. Certainly, a more fluid political structure of the good society is constantly reevaluated, revised, responsive. Women's utopia differ markedly from the male utopian tradition in the importance attached to change and creativity. This focus on and acceptance of growth, variety, and change is central to both pragmatism and feminism. In the process, model of utopia stress the social embeddedness of individuals and the connectedness of every live creature and its environment. To act within the awareness of the purpose and connectedness of all is called mindfulness. Both novels present a fluid structure that embraces growth, variety, and change. There are social arrangements, rituals, and practices that encourage or reinforce such an understanding. The habit of flexibility in each community. They do not present final perfect end states, but possible futures in process. And utopianism is a subversive political project that offers both critique of the current model and creation of something new that generates hope for the possibility of a more feminist civil society and government. Sargis in 2000. It provokes a certain sense of estrangement, which has a subversive political function. Utopias work from the margins of fantasy while addressing political desires and frustrations. Utopias are politically subversive form of political commentary. Utopia challenges by supplying alternatives, but its most persistent function is a critical commentary in society. Utopianism steps over boundaries that order and separate. It renders them meaningless or emphasizes their porosity. This permits the creation of a space where previously there was none, in which a new and different ways of relating to the world can be practiced. The dual function of utopianism has offered simultaneous political critique and the creation of something new. Utopia negates the contradictions of a social system by forging visions of what is not yet realized, either in theory or in practice, and generating such figures of hope. Utopia contributes to the open space of opposition. And this minor feminist jurisprudence disrupts the normative of false universal claim patriarchy has on legal knowledge and practice, thus changing the polity's treatment of femininity and cis and trans women. Van Marl 12. Feminist jurisprudence projects of decentering law and exposing how law rejects all of the forms of knowledge's inferior or urgent emphasis on women's experience. She considered practice as a possible way of combining theory and experience that could result in political action. I argue for a feminist jurisprudence that does not stand in the tradition of grand theorizing, but is engaged in a continuous becoming, distinguishing between molar and molecular politics. The molar politics designate a political movement that with a firm ground identity are subject to the molecular, provide space for the mobile, active, and ceaseless challenge of becoming. A feminist jurisprudence inspired by the notion of becoming does not stand in the traditional of grand theory of law, socio-legal law, and jurisprudence as major, but rather a minor jurisprudence describing it is one which neither aspires nor pretends to be the only law or universal jurisprudence. A minor jurisprudence stands in the guise of a challenge to the science of law and a threat to its monopoly of legal knowledge. We find rebels, critics, marginals, aliens, women, and outsiders who over time repeatedly challenge the dominance of any singular system of legal norms. That's the plan. The United States should legalize physician-assisted suicide for all cisgendered men.
Sorry, where's the plan?
We also emailed it to y'all.
Awesome, thank you so much. Those are both of them. Cool. Okay, if we win that the United States should not legalize it.
To win that our model of politics can't just win that the plan in a back embedded in a vision of what the future is also bad, and that our vision of still just have to.
As of the 1AC, what is the reason to vote at? What is the reason?
We have presented a. We think
I know,
that
and I'm
the
asking
acts
what-
of utopian futures based on is one that is productive for that was isolated in the 1AC.
Okay.
Reason to vote
Okay,
at.
so like you said, the first part of that is we haven't. How do you? My question is how do you?
Wait for a reason. We'll make arguments as
No,
to
but you
what
just-
these politics can do. We have made politics dealing with violence.
As-
Trick to deal with it.
As of the 1, you create good politics. I mean, what that is.
We deal with women. Seems like a good.
Deals with good, violence against
I
women.
mean,
good
we'll have
politics.
debates about the effectiveness of those different forms of politics. I know what you mean. We provide productive to deal with the way that violence act onto women and feminized. An example of what?
Of how utopianism can help.
Yes, our evidence discusses the visioning a new form of politics of masculine norms as one of the future.
And
So when
my
we
question is, ostensibly you're driving a form of utopianism.
What do you mean an example?
You just said it opens up space.
Yes,
Is
it
this
talks
space
about
never
how
been-
to is operational.
Yeah,
It also
possible example.
aims to reshape the law's prioritization. So, for example, in a priority issue, what constitutes
Essentially,
sexual
One last
assault?
time,
Like,
can you
what's
give
the
me
definition
any
of
jurisprudential
adoption? So, how
individual
about
level
giving
who's facing the?
changes of institutions?
But I thought this
and
wasn't-
of lawmaking possibly can envision in this
What
recognize
forms of
radical
lawmaking
reformism.
this masculine.
Is that?
What is dominant masculinity? It's a prioritization of masculine characteristics that dominating other countries. Do violence against women. Do not include.
Of a
I
The
think
fact that the
So-
Violence Against Women Act was gutted by the Supreme Court do not have jurisprudence in the way that it operates.
what is a man? What is a cis man?
a cis man.
So is it?
What do you mean more
Like,
important?
The definition
Well,
of
what
cis-
A
determines it?
cis man is somebody who's assigned male at birth and identifies.
Determine who to kill.
I mean, what
How do you
mean,
determine who to kill? Presumably these people are not going to
Cis men.
voluntarily kill themselves.
This just seems like a weird sidestepping tactic to avoid
No,
the.
this seems central to the premises of the 1AC. You're trying to
No.
destabilize identity, and I'm asking you why have you
Destabilize
used that
identity. That was not the AF.
What is a cis man? One last
I
time.
just told you. Somebody who's assigned male at birth and
What if
identifies
someone?
as male.
Okay, cool.
We'll keep it going for a couple seconds.
Are you all taking track?
Yep.
7:25, we're keeping going.
Sure do.
Bagel.
You want bagels? Bye, babe. Bye.
You can put this on. This just goes on.
Yeah, that's not a
No, this one goes. Yeah, you do. Hey, let's use it.
Yeah. Okay, so take.
Yep. Sorry.
Good. The doctor did it.
Cool.
Object.
Here's the contrast.
You can't get on all.
Do we have like?
T, interpretation, violation of the abstract, defend the implementation, desirability of topical action, no outside action, outside the topical plan, most critically, the agent, verb, indicated debate about hypothetical government action, action 3, each topic agent doing the act, US should adopt a policy, agent, subject, verb, urgent action should adopt means to put action into a policy, to governmental means, specification, direction, limitation, the action, design, the entirety of lawful by judicial, legislative, sanction, jurisdiction, no legalized definition, to make lawful by judicial, legislative, sanction, a general subject is not enough to be required to point difference in order to promote effective change, cycle figure 13, there, it must be a contrary before they can be made, there, making opposite sexes, more clear definition, question, meaning, feeling of any court concerns to be addressed by conversation about the topic of debate is not likely to be useful without previous question, your identification, line, demarcating sense, be resolved, effectively conscious pressure, that understanding of direct comparison of argumentation, lead affection, vague understanding of self-partitions by definition, of question, proposition, essential guidance and preparation. We have to do something but focus on discussion. They would agree to find a point clear exclusive price question pose more problem and open up by placing by the difference in price better or depth for argumentation. It feels safe, effective, the same as ability. It feels like clear basis for argumentation. A general subject is still to be brought. That's not the same base for creating interpretation based over creating interpretation of very engaging. B vote neg 1 preparation class change. Which structurally favors the advocates. They speak last and permute alternatives. Treating fairness is key to engaging a well-prepared opponent. Second, new after voting issue. They sort advocacy are possible to negate 3.
What? New violation as well. Like still.
Means you have to be at least at 90%. MU 14 nearly all is defined as greater than 90%. Most is defined as at least 50%, and some is variable. 3 tailoring identity claims to common topics for deliberation as possible and desirable. The 1 sees failure to affirm topical action impedes the debate. T's engagement on exclusion. Anderson 6 arguments are often trumped by appeals to identity, communicative reasons, to critique notion of authenticity, have unquestionable legitimacy that should not be subject to challenge or rely upon principle because that should not be subject to challenge and because the reason your false is universal and always involved in an exclusion by argument is respect. The ideals of democracy rely upon teachers argumentation. The idea that argument is somehow injurious to persons that's not armed beliefs is strenuously opposed as a notion. Any attempt to ask people to agree with process argument is a coercive norm that will disable performance identity. We should focus on our process. Justify their positions in dialogue. We hope to live in a plural society. Relations between style and position from cheers that the other use of argument or simple debate that involves taking distance from one's own free given identity as so as to talk across differences. The ethos of argument is linked to democratic debate, and an argument here is not merely academic, it's the practice in political forms and instinct. This identity of one, acknowledged identity, the need to understand practice for others and to share commitment to commonality to live together. Democratic politics and accommodate a wide variety of expressions. I do insist that dimension of experience are contributing to reasoned analysis that champions their imagine refusing in order to liberate on what's being narrative performed, the performance jobs, understanding that can be affirmative communicated used to justify political positions and legislative agendas, the impact outweighs deliberative debate and parts of skills, vital to respond to existential threats, Lundberg intended debate, deliberative democratic capacity built by debate or critical thinking, analysis, claims, informed decision making, and judgment. If the picture that on rights to be conveys pessimistic view of bureaucratic policy, policy decision to warrant your own debate, decision capacity can change debate, build field through allowing research about decisions to impact on the evidence of arguments, increasing informing rates environment that proprietary political energy for each will need to make evaluated choices about the increasing complex environment. The organs satisfaction that debate plays a critical role in problem solving skills, evidence warrant strong support for debate as intense to deliver capacity to combination critical thinking, input processing capacity for tables on arguments for debate is crucial core democratic life, not much for creating health-critical students over to meaningful engagement. The more we use political process, the more likely we are to reason a decision that necessary for democracy, drive democracy, face challenge, complete class racial, racial justice, environmental destruction, and conflict more than any specific students. We know the basic school president, best of existential challenges. Next off is regs back legalization of physician assisted suicide requires specifying the regulatory structure. Style 988 decriminalize or legalize laws that criminalize defined acts and prescribed punishment. Decrim may occur by removal of criminal law statements defined as conduct of harmful. Decrim confers no special privileges or immunities on physicians nor on safe harbor. Legalization defines the acts that are authorized by specifying what, how, and when, and whom they be performed. Legalization also confers immunity or improper legalized VAS. Measure law physicians to arrive legal dose and conditions are met. Vote neg 1 clear specification is key to effective and ethical analysis of PAS legalization. Lord Drew 14 discussions concerning assisted suicide reveal a surprising last consensus regarding the difference between assisted suicide and euthanasia 12 applying level 3 to basic facts on this concerning getting the ethical decision making requires getting the facts straight about such problems. PAS Harvard some simple conversation with the accident agreement first principle without treating knowledge based on the award euthanasia without except PAS and which state otherwise we consider the effective legalization on patients, families, physicians, the law, the society at large. Our goal is to provide making useful for ethical decision making presumption, failure to specify policy details, kills debate, guarantees the plans manipulated in a way that they don't want. Galleys 9 any informed policy decision has to be based on specific proposals, absent concrete details. No one can judge how it would fare for policy bill. Rhetoric, some match there's no reason a policy will be improved details. The only way to forecast results, including unintended consequences, meeting goals, inconsistent with intent, will go on achieving goals based on by the quality of bureaucrats and based on time about the situation. Know what to enhance the elevator principle keeping detail problems slightly in agreement. Any person will be pairing by saying we have no plans to do that. Any rhetorical advice is also handy to incorporate alternatives and the bad policy. The critique will imagine utopian future for quality but legal style neoliberal citizenry. Ryan 11 tracing historical development of we are able to gain some insights provide subjection of the self to this became objectified identities, which then become the object of medicalization, normalization, demands for our right to die, our own diet, rather, as a result of escalation of government power, euthanasia can be used as black new liberal tendencies, like article government that requires the means and means to shape the conduct of its system requires that the population to be acted on and ensure its own welfare. Discourses of autonomy are accepted as common sense to seek the euthanasia of poverty. Discourses also allow for the exercising of power while simultaneously masking that power. The marketization of society makes
Actually, sorry, can you read this in back? I'm sorry.
Your ballot has to center around class politics. Capitalism is the root of gendered and racialized oppression, makes mass balance determination inevitable. McLaren for race relations are structured by large nationality, political economy, physical characteristics, utilized divided workers and removed from main and free labor acting bodies, nor colonized and racialized. The theory of abandoned class analysis of capitalism more universal, more ruthless, more deadly, economic strength, radical politics, temporary rooms, do nothing further struggles against oppression, which continue material fuel marks but have been reduced to supplicants of the most degraded political policy imaginable. Post Marx have been busily fiddling well. Rome, French practitioners privileged to realm of representation as an arena of political struggle, substance analysis of class exploitation and marginalized debate by radicals themselves among the academic left style change the imagination must cease placing class analysis with difference. The progressive left is to refuse to neoliberalism, which work to naturalize suffering on mind, collective struggle, obliterate hope. The humanity may be blood of capitalism, collective suicide capitalism have paved the way for the dehumanization of economic history. We are witnessing social disintegration. 2.8 billion people struggle on less than $2 a day. 250 million children are wage slaves. These concrete realities require a vigorous class analysis on unraveling critique of capitalism. Do you need anything else on this?
Yeah, this one.
And our alternative is recommitment to class struggle grounded in socialist humanism, pedagogical recommitment to Marxist struggle scheme. McLaren for the radical education must continue to educate, engage in Marxism, extrapolate, for which useful pedagogically and politically, collective socialist vision, necessitate moving beyond the particularism and liberal pluralism that in foreign politics difference requires challenging questionable assumptions that constitute radical pedagogy, which needs a coach and understanding of systemic nature exploitation. The political economy that incorporates Marxist unity, difference which people share material interests, such an understanding extends beyond the realm of theory into manner in which we interpret and explore the world frameworks are used to express understanding and apply organizational practice and political agendas, identifying class struggle as the base for political transformation, apply something like different from directing political agency around race or gender. The task is to plant seeds for political gender informed by political economy all over the globe. There have been anti-capitalist movements of socialist vision remains crucial, whose vision of future features include the potential of people to challenge collectively the contrary to inherit the best hope in the development of critical consciousness and aid to make history. The relevance of radical socialist pedagogy is centrality to explore capital plus cultivate socialist vision, a task which requires much more obtuse convolution in the agonistic arena of signifying principles.
Do you want anything else in this?
No.
So,
Yeah,
I need that. This,
Yep.
or the next one?
The
Next one.
Okay, next off, counterpoint. Text, the United States should legalize non-physician assisted suicide for cisgender men and cyanide pills. Non-physician assisted suicide solves best is key to demedicalize death. Ziegler and nine whether assisted death. Dying should be assisted by physicians in light of the Swiss model to use physicians to be no. The use of private right store organization address the concerns of physician involvement. Legalization of RTD organizations will help in an ongoing effort to demedicalize the way we die. Assist death the potential to inform the debate on the legalization of PAS in the U.S. and also demedicalize the way we die. PAS recreates the physician as the arbiter of life and death. Non-physician alternatives are better. Nietzsche 12. Medical assistance to die. Type qualifications to be met. Safe, regulate any area in the law. Person terminally ill, sound mind, aware of palliative care forecast must be repeated for a serious ill person amount in about the time amount of qualification other kind nothing from what's the purpose of only law. If suicide is legal, efficient, is arbiter with PhD as a provider of expertise concerning which drugs to take and in which quantity reinforces medicalization of death.
So I can read the other one or case?
just hit them. Go to case.
Okay, case. Starting politics from the standpoint of an excluded identity group is the vengeful politics of resentment. It can only position itself reactively against the ostensible universal when inevitably reinstantiating the terms of oppression that it started with. Bomb or attempt reification of politicized identities, wounded, attached people over invested in historical suffering, the perpetration to do where identity is founded upon experience, exclusion become firstly valorizing the continuation of that identity. Group activity operates to reproduce the identity created by injury in opposition to resolving social relations to generate that identity in the first place. The extent that identity associated with historical entity of the future is already determined by the injury. Politicized identity obtains coherence through exclusion of central universal existence requires legitimate universal ideal and exclusion of those ideals such as identity become invested in our opponents to revenge. These reactions are substitutes for action rather than acting to remove the cause of suffering. The suffering is compensated by vengeful pleasures for recrimination. Such practices provide obstacle practice that seek to dispel the notion of exclusion, turn to the future. Need not be considered rejection of past in order to break the stealing path. We must be realm political action analyzing. The path to political action is likely to be achievable by individual development, but requires a community of participants. The pain of historical energy is not simply an individual psychological issue, but stems from social conditions which create injustice and problems associated with identity functions overcome the shift in which language identity is expressed in terms of desire rather than ontology, self-limited language of I am with the language I want this for us.
Mark with the language I want this for us.
Why didn't you read framework?
You read topic analysis.
Okay, but I guess what does it mean to have an agent enact a U.S. policy?
What do you mean?
I don't know. I'm talking about your intern.
Our interpretation is that the advantages have to be based off the outcome of the plan.
That's not what you said. An agent must enact a U.S. policy. What does that mean?
No, our Erickson card is about the federal government.
Yes.
It's
So
about
what
them.
does that mean? We read a plan. Has the federal government do
And
something?
we're obviously going to make arguments about extra topicality based on the way you explain.
Explain to me though how we are not the federal government.
The burden of the
enacting
negative
law.
should be to refute the question: should the federal government or should
You're
the
not
U.S.
answering any of my questions.
No,
I'm asking about the definitions you read that says that we
Yeah.
are not topical.
The debate is about should the U.S. legalize PAS. You have made the debate about
That's not
is
what you
our
said on
method
T.
good? No. Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
so
that's
what does it mean
if you-
to,
that's
so
what we're
legalize
clarifying
means
now,
to
yes.
make lawful. Do we make PIS for all men lawful, cis men lawful?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we meet your inter?
No, we're
Well,
making
we've
extra
read
topicality.
other interpretations, and we've also made an extra topicality arg at the very
The whole
top.
the whole
That's
point of
weird. I don't
Steinberg and Freely
understand.
is that the debate
Oh.
needs to come down to a specific point of difference. We think that the resolutional statement is that, and muddling the
It just
terms of
seems
the
like you
debate by
can't envision any form of politics outside the dominant one of the status
It
quo. I
seems-
don't know why that's a reason we don't meet your inter.
I really
but
don't
we can
think-
talk about something else. What's a reasoned argument?
one that is able to state justifications in a way others.
So you don't think we have justifications for our AF?
No, we obviously think you do.
Okay, then what's the link to this Anderson evidence?
It's the
You
internal
said that
link
we
is
need to
based
have
off
a
of-
reasoned argument.
Yeah.
So we're not reasonable, we're irrational, the politics of the 1DC don't have any argument for why they could be good.
I think you're doing our argument a severe discredit.
Explain it in a way that
Has to give us more than 10 seconds to talk.
Sure.
We will explain it.
The internal link is about embracing a culture of argumentation is necessary to endorse notions of respect, reciprocity, willingness to listen to others' opinions.
okay,
willingness
but that's
to-
just by appeals to culture. Why is the 1AC an appeal?
Reality argument to NC. I think I've given you what the link
Sure.
is right now. The debate should be about the question.
Lundberg, existential
should the-
threats. How does the 1AC not resolve mental and okay,
That's going to be part of our argument.
sure. PAS regulation, your definition. Legalization must define the act of who the act may be performed on.
No, it says who does the act.
No, may be performed.
No.
It's not only who
It defines
it's
the
done
act
on.
authorizing by specifying what, how, and when, and by whom they may be performed.
I don't understand why PAS for all cis-men is not a regulation on how PAS is operationalized.
You don't specify what, how, when, and by.
Okay, what does it mean to commit to the class struggle?
It means to envision a socialist future.
Envision a socialist future.
We're
Okay,
agreeing that
what's the
utopianism
status
is
of the
good. We're
K?
saying that it's always an option.
Okay, so I guess then, how does the K resolve the existence of cis-men?
We think that we should ground politics in the universal notion of equality, which rejects that premise.
Let's take some prep.
I don't know. Well, maybe. You're an illegal violation. I forgot about that.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's another thing.
Could you send into the cap cards?
Oh, yeah, I'm really sorry. You want me to flash it?
You
yeah.
don't have internet now.
I do, but I don't know where it is.
Okay, I'm ready. 7:40. Do you flash the
You just earn theirs. I can, if you flash it to me, or I'll just email it.
Okay, sounds good.
So.
Oh, I need another second of prep.
There it is.
Thank you.
Which one?
Okay, I'm prep.
No, we have 7:35.
I'll take 1 second. Okay, that's 7 seconds.
Cool.
Thank you. The order is going to be case, T nearly all, T regulation, the counterplan, and then the critique.
So, sorry, T includes nearly all, yeah? Or is that a second?
I put it separately,
Okay.
but it's right after the first T where you read it, so you can
Great.
fill it however you want. Okay, is everyone ready?
Sorry, why? What was it?
Oh, sorry. So T nearly all, T regulation, process counter plan, the pick, and neolib.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Okay, is everyone ready?
They have not grappled with the thesis of the act that patriarchy is universal but not monolithic and manifests itself in different ways across class, gender, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, religion, able-bodiedness, system, trans status, gender, bound structures, the everyday reality, causing and normalizing, depoliticizing the sexual assault, femicide, murder, domestic abuse, and sexual slavery. Patriarchy scripts women's bodies, driving to neatly separate them into different categories and policing and devaluing the expression of femininity, causing unique violence against trans women. That's array and Serrano evidence. Women are excluded from politics, left out of decision-making, and code is irrational and weak is very evidence, which means that we are a radical reform to the way the system operates. The implementation of the plan is a manifestation of feminist utopianism. It is not about achieving a perfect world without men, but rather about the implementation does to challenge the dominant notions of who should be empowered, which bodies matter. This resentment argument is turned by the act as we create the utopian hope that moves beyond the identity of injury. Also, resentment and resentment are sometimes necessary to as a response to patriarchy because of the way that women are always placed in a form of contentment. That's string turn 14. Nietzsche's characteristics of women as anchors in order to delegitimize the gender theme of Resentment and Nietzsche's philosophies of apologetic from male dominance. Nietzsche's retreat from the Resentment, the hostility, vengeance of the entirely unaccosted by the excuse of women except for the situation patriarchal dominant side. The strengths of the lives of women are that captain secondary and inferior. The good reasons do not for their predicament. Nietzsche's demand for their women to abandon their impossible to self-serving rather than that which is feminist and vengeance the circumstance of the branch Resentment and Nietzsche's feminism, the question of feminine Resentment, fitting the female vengeance of Nietzsche has been arguing the effort of women to transcend the situation only retrospectively to move into the resentment and resentment's quintessential feminine instead of the occasion by patriarchal social relations go to topicality. We are defending a plan in the imagined world of its enactment just because our advantages were not some kind of silly nuclear war extinction and centered around the conservative male politicians does not mean that we do not meet this is guilt by identity. Reading framework performs the links to patriarchal jurisprudence because all beyond this utopian conservative men in Congress wrote to make pot legal or organ sales sanctioned. But when women are arguing about how we should imagine a feminist conception of jurisprudence, all of a sudden we are too utopian, too unpredictable. They cannot kick framework, they should lose before publicly denying the vision of politics outside of patriarchy. Their Anderson evidence exemplifies this by saying that identity is used as a trump card as if it was not a suggestion of how we can reform politics. Utopianism is critical to have a political engagement that opens up space for debate about what the future could be. It combines a critique of advocacy to create a feminist pragmatism. That's Serrano and McKenna evidence. The feminist imaginary will always be extra T, which is necessary because it's outside of the current constraints that exist. But reading the plan solves any kind of stasis arguments that they would make it as a check against what they would talk about. The plan is only to determine whether institutional response to utopianism is resistance and force to be reconciled to institutions, which means that we turn all of the Lumberg evidence bug in 12. We lack creation, we lack resistance to the present. Resistance to the present is necessary for the invention of a new earth and new people. The institutions might be broad. You bear the constructive phase of the creating a new earth is critical parts of the injustice of the traditional conception of law is the clinical parts of the product of the positive, the curative model of law and jurisprudence. The clinical conception of laws and jurisprudence as they reject the model of law and restrictions and limitations to argue that the positive create a practice of the body of fixed law, but the open practice of assessing for the singular situations of inventing is promoting the freedom of the jurisprudence is a philosophy of law that deals with singularity, the rejection of the notion of law and governance as a whole that makes it positive and practice of the laws of Lucy and political thought is utopian, firmly grounded in political socio-culture. The real the conception of the engagement, the initial about the deterritorialization, the contextual element of its endpoint is the deterritorialization element, a new earth, the new people is not ideal but better. The accessibility, just that the plan is a prerequisite to having accessibility. The law that Hakeley and and Mary McKenna, evidence 20C demonstrates the negative insistence on engaging the name of the law and the name of predictability cannot be separated from the patriarchal fantasy that ruins accessibility to the law for women, and separating the substantive questions of theoretical claims of fairness and limits proves the hegemonic masculinity that's a very when we see evidence. There's also no impact. We will defend the plan as a good idea. We'll never spike out of legalizing PAS, but rather we should be able to, the only question is the standard of which you evaluate the plan counter or interpretation. The affirmative must defend a tactical plan, and the act gets to determine the telos under which that plan is evaluated. The negative determine the framework under the act, and if it was debated, the act would always lose. They're shifting the goalposts in every negative debate. They say that we can use feminist justifications to endorse a plan, and then when we do that, you said that we are bad and new acts are good. Debating against a new act plan that allows your skills to be encouraged and forces you to use existing research to create arguments that you can think on your feet. Reading a new act gives the skills to be able to be forces us to survey the literature and the new innovations about the way in which a topic can be used in more feminist ways outside of what it currently looks like. The NDT is the best place to do this because negative teens are most prepared, and whatever the debaters will be at the top of their game, the topic is explored through the new limits of possibilities. What is truly there's no bright line for this new plans and advantages. Add-ons of politics literature to win the debates that wouldn't fit into the new app definition. This is the wrong remedy for the new apps. They go to the T, nearly all we need. There are two counter interpretations. One is that nearly all modifies the states. This reference to geography early in the year. This proves because marijuana teams would avoid the picks out of individual states based on this rating. Counter interpretation two is nearly all modifies PAS. The types of PAS. We legalize all types of PAS. You prefer this interpretation because of the literature-based PAS is described as referring to types and state-by-state issue, and also in the context of PAS, nearly all cannot be just a number of people that commit suicide because that generally is a very small. That generally is a very small portion. Washington, Oregon proved reasonability. Judge interventions instead will competing interpretations lead to erase the bottom. Go to T regulation. We specify PAS for cisgender men. That is a regulation specifies who, and also regulations we will define cross-apply the reasonability standard. They're kind of like the goal of the act is not to look at the particular issues. Whether it's good under a patron of possibilities for feminist jurisprudence which lords the question of the debate is the ultimate political imaginary, not whether the specific reform is good or bad of political repercussions attached to status quo, which means that you, an outsider, do not answer the thesis of the act. There's a focus to that trying to shift the debate to the questions of the actor means that we never discuss the central question of the advocacy of feminist utopian political strategy and only discuss the ticky-tacky bureaucratic issues. There's a substantive dissent to this because bureaucratic ticky-tacky issues allow for masculinity to reassert itself and bog us down to put the barrier up to feminist policy strategies to perform. Men are always trying to envision and create utopias that put women in them. Women never get to create and control their own futures and visions. This is always dictating someone else's term. Perm do both, and the counterplan links to the counterplan to perm to the counterplan. Results as a precursor to policy should means ought to the subject and sex for the child that described only as mandatory and should be described as desirable enough, and conditionality is a voting issue first, and strategy skew the negative would be able to go for whatever we undercover, making it possible for us to stick them with the often shallow education they do not to defend their advocacies. Is disincentivized as depth of research. Third is if they win the conditionality is good to get to advocate one legitimate perm counter interpretation. You can run one conditional option, and also men should not get conditionality. Conditionality is an example of patriarchal law because it pick and chooses about the way in which gender bonds operate. The advocates of that regulations and reforms shifts it and abandons the alters in service of what suits men best in hegemonic the masculine in the context given. Also, we turn the argument because the act creates a shift in the medical industry that make it exclusively run by women, so that people who are not cisgender men would be able to turn to their doctors and would solve the impact of weird benefit. Hardest in 13 where women, the intersectionality, race, class, gender, sexuality, put the important role of the healthcare and health research and discrimination, the attacks of the internal sense of the material sources, the participation of women's exclusion of how the African Americans, the history, the participate in the research and stress women make in relation to the doctor, physicians, the consideration and intersection of race and gender. Women have been mistreated by health research of the serial justice experiences of minority women and remain invisible in the public conscience, not just in helping the victims of medical research. Roger medical research. Go to the capitalism. Okay, the link assumes that the act was trying to be able to create a right to death as a subject. It's not the act. We literally don't care if we turn men into docile subjects. Feminist utopia is necessary to challenge the patriarchal notions of home and reproduces capitalism and liberal democracy. Suffered in '97. This masculine discourse is that sensitive liberal democracy requires the women to be able to protest the social order beginning of the home that serves the protection of the interests of capitalism, democracy, the social the story of the behavior of a girl to marry a boy. The girl stays home. The boy has good capitalist work establishing the correlation between the family and the materialism for the feminist utopian narratives given the image in the relationship between women and the notions of which the calling to the members of the question of the determining the virtues of the family, traditional government, the notions of the state that social structurally for the community, the feminist utopia prescription, or the other notions that the language of equality is bad because you turn back to Clive and Roy Rafter. The present language of equality is problematic because its insistence on fairness, which rather than accounting for the violent past, present, and future, and we kill all cisgender men to be altered the way the societal work operates, which means that we're an interruption to capitalist modes of production, and by the greatest of times because the opposition to institutional family, heterosexuality, reproduction, and state that queerness as but
the strange temporality, the acceptance of the economic practices, the competence of the subject, the culture of the practice of certain moods, having the queer times, the potentialities that are suited for the conventions of family, inheritance of the genre, and the queer temporalities, march of queer temporalities, permutation do both. Permutation do both. The root cause arguments are reductions. She looks at the patriarchy and capitalism become entangled in order to have the best strategies to be able to resist them.
Okay. Please. Okay. Okay, then.
Yep. Okay, 538. Okay, so this Vogue card you read on T says in the small font, obviously, Deleuze and Guattari reject the utopian strain of political thought that orients social action in terms of a pre-established plan, blueprint, or model of a desirable future.
Yeah, that's pretty
Why
in
did
line
you
with
insert
feminist.
the plan in the 1AC?
Sure, so that's pretty in line with like feminist utopian thought, right? The McKenna evidence talks about how it's about the process of utopia. We think the plan,
Can you explain how that reconciles
Yep,
with
we
the
think-
with
that's
Ev that we
about-
read in the 2AC that
Yep.
says that's not good for utopianism
No, no,
to read
no.
a plan?
Yeah, I was about to answer that.
Okay.
So the plan is not the end point. That's how you view it in the way that you're like.
What do you think
It-
D and G are talking about?
Would you
when
let
they're
me
like a
finish one of your
pre-established
questions?
plan?
Because I'm connecting the way in which the process of utopia, but rather the way, and not an endpoint, but rather the way that it is like a fluid imagining.
Why include
it's
a plan
connected.
at all?
Is it jumping,
What Ev?
reading how
I'm wondering if you
Oh,
Ev
well,
there. It does plan or
the point of it's not about to say
Your jumping off point, as you just put it.
you, but
Okay,
not
great.
in the constraints of. I mean, you
What's the reason?
focuses on the bureau relates to picked for side as they relate to
how does the
politics.
1AC not do that when you on reg spec as we meet regs where, when, and how?
What happened, right?
Okay.
Like,
That's
not-
totally reasonable. Why should men be the only men who die?
Form of privilege, and that has pattern queer bodies and
Is that
women.
inevitable?
What do you mean is that? And where men are gone, and this is like really productive to envision how we can change the
Okay, why is PA point then if
because it's not about the perfect end state, but rather what the process.
at
For
all
example,
relevant if it's
question is necessary. What if we premise that they did?
we wouldn't be having this debate.
That's my argument.
No. Do all men not get con?
Just men.
Just checking. All right, Tristan.
Cool.
All right, the order is the pick, the doctor's pick, the case, and then the, yeah. Counterplan, case, yeah. Everybody get it? Cool.
The case we have not dropped the thesis of, but we have impact turn the thesis.
Oh, I'm sorry, on the counterplan, right? Mixed up my thoughts.
The counterplans also part of the case that we have picked out of the position. They have no defense of that. This is a relevant question. The first part of it, at the top of the TA, the focus TA with action, bureaucratic issues, etc. There's no link to this. This is a question of competing methodologies because, like they said in the cross-examination of the TUAC, it's a question of what is a good jumping-off point for utopian vision. None of their evidence indicates. They even said in the TUAC cross-examination that they have evidence that indicates the plan that we start with is important, which is what the whole cross-examination was about. We set them up for this on purpose, which means that if we prove that we have a better jumping-off point, i.e., imagining imagining the assisted suicide of all cisgender men, absent the physician, then it turns their ability to go for any of their arguments about why they're a good jumping off point because we have proven we are a better one, or you should vote negative on presumption to endorse the entirety of the 1AC absent the endorsement of the plan text because if it's really about any bureaucratic focus, then inclusion of the plan text can only be bad to their goals and means you push negative on presumption, we can endorse the entirety of the 1AC, which is functionally a floating pick. They say there's bureaucratic issues, ticky-tacky, etc. This is not ticky-tacky. This is offensive for the people against whom violence will be done in the world of the affirmative in the name of remedicalizing the stable notions of cis and trans bodies. They have conceded fundamentally that an argument that the medicalization of life and death is ultimately what allows the sovereign to carry out violence. The impact is unending violence in the way 2005 death, stop the limit of power, the close type of power, the knowledge of the sovereignty, the subject of sovereignty, the power to stop doctors, type of life and death. The power of life and death becomes the domain of the doctor, the sovereignty, new fissures and pray. This is supposed to build a politicization of death. The artists have to explain the world of medical power, they made level question of medical power, though they did not go far enough to revealing each portion of death. They turned what is supposedly private into public sector, the hospital, the space, power, the bullish distinction between public and private, that result in a hidden political dimension or exposure to death by medical power. This in the 2NC, but starting with the position of the doctor creates a notion of a cisgendered male that when she says in the 2NC that the women would all be doctors, that is false, given that they are using an imaginary of implementing physician-assisted suicide, and the majority of doctors are men in the United States, which means that they recreate the position of male as authority to have the decision over when, how, and under what conditions physician-assisted suicide is undertaken, which they did not consider that they did not contest the link to that argument, the regulatory specification argument, which means the legalization necessarily entails a licensing regime, which ultimately recreates the arbiter of the male figure. The more and more they try to go, there's no link to go further. There's no link to any of these net benefits because we imagine a world in which all the women are doctors and they all kill the cisgender men. Proves our arguments on topicality that becomes fundamentally impossible to be negative and refute the affirmative in any meaningful manner because we don't have because the resolution is no longer the starting point for offense, but rather however the affirmative wants to randomly envision their debate, but argument will be taking that more in the one or another states agents of question. The questions are bad, etc. This all proves the link to the topicality argument doesn't make any above me relevant negative ground based off U.S. legalization. Impossible agent questions are important in this case. That was the explanation of the jumping off point argument above. If when you have a bad jumping off point, we are better advocates and we should win, which is because debate is fundamentally an intellectual testing ground. If we win, we have a better idea that you should vote to endorse that in order division. They say men create utopias and put women in it. If all disagreement is fundamentally violence, why are we here? What is the point of even debating each other? We're not telling you what to do. We're saying we think we may have found a small flaw with your argument and a way to make it better. That's ultimately the impact of debate. It's a process of constant intellectual refinement, which is strikingly similar to the language of the 1AC. So if they go for this argument, the disagreement and contradictions and resolving those via process of argumentation is bad, then they have double turned their 1AC. And in fact, this argument probably means you should vote negative on presumption because it precludes the utopic politics in which men can be envisioned to cooperate with women and not solely be doing violence to them. They say permutation to the counterplan obviously suffers out of the position of the plan effects. That's a jumping off point for all negative makes it a possibly negative. That has to be voting issue. They say should is ought to. The counterplan proves that the AF ought not happen because we have a better jumping off point. Also, the U.S. should definitions on the T debate origin extending proves that this is a relevant consideration, conditionality, counterprediction. The judge consider any germane opportunity to cost the AF.
Ace one, they destroy policymaking, limited the agnorm advocacy, artificially insulates the affluent definitive options, kills cost benefit analysis, before strategy, forces we see to recognize argument interaction with critical advocacy and strategic opponents. You would not prop bad absolute losing the market idea, C-spline, flex that way as you are persuasion, and infinite prep, hamper, egg offense, to an artist, answer theory, and subsoul, the two error, D splines, use inevitable every positions, conditional, but counterpoints, keeping that ground proliferation, but turns their education arguments. They say shallow education applies more. If they shift the stasis point for the debate, that will mean we'll explicitly concede that impact argument. It means they link to a more on topicality. It also links to the fact that they read a new app disclosure is able to solve all of their offense. None of the arguments on the other page they can go for, given that they have said that shallow education is bad, and breaking new app fundamentally leads to more shallow education because we don't have a chance to research it, etc. Now they say they can't advocate the permutation that's illogical. They prove the permutation proves that the counterplan is not. If they win the permutation, it proves that the counterplan of the alternative is not an opportunity cost, which means that it's no longer a relevant consideration. They say counterinterpretation that does not solve negative flexibility. Obama had to defend healthcare from the hard left and the hard right. Their interpretation means that affluently assume that the direction of the plan is good, not that the plan is optimal, which is ultimately what the aspirin should be. They said men shouldn't get conditionality. Debate is ultimately cited for intellectual experimentation. The idea that we should not be able to have more than one idea is facile, given that we are 21 years old. The idea that we have the perfect solution to all of the problems in the world, that we should only get one advocacy or maybe the status quo, links to all of their arguments about creating a stable blueprint and double turn theaf. This is where also impact turning a rigidified conception of what male is on the other page. They say they say that the AF shifts the impact and solves the impact, etc. This card will lose in the debate. It says that medicalization is bad because women are fundamentally excluded from the medical sphere, which turns their arguments she's making about how the doctor will be the woman. This means that this is a bad starting point. Medicalization will recreate standard binaries between trans and cis, etc., which ultimately underlines for violence to be done against women by creations of categories. Will be exploited more in the case when I go there, or I'm not going to go there yet. Criticism of medicalization while simultaneously extending the realm of medical control is part and parcel and figure of authority scale of 99. So deeply embedded goes unnoticed. Their paradox of an attitude toward modern medicine. On the one hand, on the other hand, we open the doors for physicians to domain suicide. We recognize the facet out a thoroughly public consciousness is imbued in medical ideology. Suicide is incorrect, represented death, demedicalization, death that extends the power of the physician to regulate death now under the guise of assisted suicide. Now the case. We have explicitly taken up the thesis of the affirmative by impact turning a satisfied notion of identity. We can only consider their utopian policies in opposition to what the status quo politics is. How historically result in violent atrocities in the name of revolutionary purity, which turns all of their process good arguments. The idea that the imagination needs us killing a large sect of people can only pave the way those who they view as privilege, which is exactly the rhetoric that is used in the one is here Obama. That is static notion which we seek to resist. This is especially of opposition. No affirmative political potential other than doing the exact opposite and taking it to the radical extreme, but that is historically proven abysmal. They say resentment is necessary. We do not say that anger is bad. This is a simplistic understanding of resentment. We have a specific link application given that their definition of their identity can only be contra cis men. What about a utopia in which cis men were not to be seen as intrinsically violent? That is the utopia that we will endorse. That is the utopia of the alternative on the other page, which they conceded in the 2AC. Identity arguments are only never implicit explanations of constitutive effects of social order, never manifestation of some metaphysical status. Their beholdenness to that metaphysical assumption of identity is bad. Barber 2010. Identities were not understood the theoretical identities of the people. Some to be the world, critical ways, substantive claims on identity, implicit explanation, those social world concepts, relation to power, experience is something that not occurs always word interpretation, collectively appears on equal agents of epistemology and community distraction. Personal lack of an experience of discrimination makes one of the paradigms in which one attempts to understand the acts of discrimination that is not necessary to have an actually identified experience outside of self to make identification, except the experience of not a contract with the read and transformed with transparency. We think there's some politically self-defeating about insisting only one can only understand experience or comments on if one has actually had the experience of privilege, knowing claims that they still direct experience or one that claims authenticity to narrow identity politics limits the mandatory potential of movements or organizations. Mark that card of movements or organizations cap. At the drop, they have conceded that the alternative is able to solve the case hard and started the one in CY saying we endorse a utopian imaginary of socialism, which means we access all of their utopianism good arguments. It's only whether or not PAS and the assumption of cis male violence is a good starting point. I made some of our best like arguments on the other page. I'll make some more of them. Here, I'll make some other ones here. The affirmative relies on a satisfied notion of gender that ignores the way that capitalism is fundamentally structured those notions of gender through the creation of the nuclear family. After the transition from agrarian economies, the creation of the nuclear family led to the male. The dominant male is that the property holder through which an inheritance was to be passed. That ultimately laid the way for the nuclear family. Just one and see declare and evidence. They've conceded at the meta-level impact argument. The capitalists make ecological collapse, say poverty, and mass violence against racialized and gendered others. Inevitable between two impact argument that fundamentally outweighs the case. The alternative is able to solve the entirety of the case. Recommitting to socialist humanism is able to open up a form of equality that is able to get rid of the conditions of possibility for the violence of the affirmatives criticizing to begin with instead of simply equality is bad because we need to question notions of fairness. Equality, not truly a notion of equality if it doesn't question the violence upon which the alternative is able to recognize. Humanism recognizes the claims to violence in the past the way that capitalism structures that violence and is a prerequisite to that. Now, so to all have Arjun Carter on the one hand, they say we need to kill men, and that kills Cap. Are you kidding me? Women are becoming dominant CEOs. I'm so fucking scared of speech for that exact reason. They have that proves our links to our argument about satisfied understanding of identity, because women can become CEOs and profiteers and destroy the environment too. They have a romanticized understanding of gender. They say queer time. We will endorse this, but their understanding of time is static in that it is not queer because it cannot imagine a future where cis men are not violent. 1 second.
Cool. Good.
Good?
Yep.
Okay. On the counterplan, how does taking the physician out of, I guess, your analysis transform the medical industry? Like, how does just imagining that men kill themselves deal with the medical industry?
Well, it doesn't center the medical industry, which is part and parcel of the way it sustains itself through an ideological belief that is a necessary and inevitable part of politics, which is proven by the unreflexive inclusion of the plan of the 1AC.
How does it do anything to confront the way that that industry operates?
Ideology is supported by belief that it has power, which is proven by the 1AC's unreflexive inclusion of the plan. We think that demedicalizing death is a way to break the hold that medical sovereignty has over us.
How does having, I guess,
Also, it's part of our utopian imaginary.
But what is the connection to that? Actually, that's fine. On Cap, how does capitalism explain things like slut shaming?
It explains that, like slut shaming, so it's bad to isolate individualistic instances of gender violence without looking at them in the totality of political economy.
It seems pretty important.
No, I totally agree. But to say that the solution to slut shaming is, for example, to do things like slut walk, for example, is to reduce gender to an individualistic understanding and abstract it from political economy.
That didn't answer my question at all as to how capitalism provides justification.
I explained in the 2NC why capitalism can explain patriarchy as a superstructure, and that creates the conditions of possibility for slut shaming. I guess that's the answer to your question.
I guess because
patriarchy is a structure. Do you?
No, but the way shaming operates is like so.
Power.
It basically says women should not have a bunch of sex, which is exactly the opposite mentality, which would say women having a bunch of sex would provide labor, produce a bunch of workers. Like, it goes against the ideology of capitalism.
I
think
you just made a couple of statements I would probably disagree with. I think like having sex is not necessarily antithetical to capitalism or necessarily.
That's not. You missed it. How does it explain things like date rape?
I'm just going to give the same answer.
Okay.
Isolate an individualistic act of violence like that, it reduces gender to a manifestation in individuals
and
ignores that power operates through us, but does not contain us.
So how does, rejecting the system of capitalism, though, deal with those ingrained instances? Like,
by starting with the presupposition of equality. Like, obviously, the alternative things, everything you just said is incredibly...
Make this line about how, what if we gendered men, like, not causing violence? That's the squo. Like, that's exactly the imaginary of what people think of the squo.
That's not our imaginary.
Then what is?
Our imaginary is one in which state that within individuals like the...
I guess a line from the future...
men are dead, right? You haven't described a single instance of value to cis men.
Except the 2EC overview.
Excuse me.
I think I just closed out the...
Deal. Cards, Miles was talking about. Okay, to read some others. NDT nearly all.
NDT nearly all?
Yeah. So starting with like data. A lot of cards. Yeah.
Dark history is viewed tomorrow, Washington Butler's persisting life implications posed for transgender individuals themselves. We take into account the people they are placing under scrutiny. The theory is often inaccessible to the very theory for whom it pertains. Transgenders like the CP more than the plan. Barnes and Juan Khalifa presents the image that transgender community which is fairly proactive regarding the percent medicalization of their bodies, saying that rather than being grateful for help, transsexuals they are questioning the authority of the medical professionals who function as gatekeepers of sex reassignment. The ideologies impeding the rise of trans orders are still too far overpowering and almost entirely supported by complex social network, including medicine. The critique, the K in no way denies the existence of oppression of women and does not footnote gender. CAP is the most precise theoretical framework that connects disparate oppressions based on gender and explains all those questions in the cross-examination. Smith 97 feminists writers accuse Marx of economic reductionism. They accusations rest on a false assumption of Marxism's mornings from its oppression, class oppression. They underlying assumption of women's oppression is partly personal relation related to last society, product of unequal personal relationship between women. The practice set up by Marxist theories are strong and economic terms. The argument goes that Marxism cannot explain the personal aspects of women's oppression because it locates oppression in class society. This is a caricature of Marxism, which assumes that Marxism only concerns itself with the workplace, but locating the economic roots of inequality is precisely the way to understand how seemingly quite different forms of oppression have come to play a crucial role in propping up representation for ignoring the personal aspects of that angles. The first theoretical plan for understanding the angles incorporating all aspects of women's oppression, including domestic abuse, alienation of sexuality, commodification of sex, the emphasizing the equality between women and men and family, locating the source of women's oppression in class society in no way limits our understanding of the impact it has had on lives of individual women, and the permutation does not solve. It results in worse political training. Deciding between competing methodologies is necessary to ensure the affirmative is forced to rigorously defend their strategy. They should be forced to defend the 1AC's move and should not be able to get this permutation young and six. How should we represent the best ways to limited time, resource, and creative on structural justice combination responsibility overly demanding part of what it means to be responsible social action model is to be accountable for what it means to run side for one structural justice to choose to address most of us should responsibly more than we can start to try. We must make choices about whether our actions can be useful, whether injustice regard them be urgent. Any permutation severs the epistemological framing of the 1AC. Our evidence explicitly says that the way we understand and explain the accounts of oppression in terms of gender and experience has crucial political impacts because it preconfigures resistance, which means that our analytical lens is better than theirs. It means that they should not get this permutation. The topicality argument, the app must defend advantages based on the enactment of a topical plan text answering the question the U.S. should not legalize X should always be a sufficient reason to vote negative. This is the most predictable based on the wording of the resolution. U.S. should means the debate is about government policy implementation, which is why they do not meet the Erickson definition proven by what they said at the top of the counterplan. Nearly all means 90% of PAS must be legalized, which they have no counterinterpretation for. And legalizing PAS is defined as the creation of a regulatory system specifying who does it, which they do not do. Like the ones the evidence making debate about any other question, like the political imaginary, which they forefront on the counterplan to prove it doesn't matter, means the core negative offense based on legalization no longer applies. Three impacts to that. One, predictable negative ground. Their interpretation guarantees the app is always a step ahead and supports negative strategy, allowing the app to say you can't win, our plan is bad, but you have to win. Our invocation of the plan is bad sets the bar too high for the negative and too low for the app. Their interpretation creates a moving target under which the negative never knows what exactly they're supposed to refute. Two impacts. One, negative ground is intrinsically valuable. Debate's a game, so relative equality for both sides is key. Debate is a game of inches, so any link should be sufficient reason to vote negative. We don't have to win any clear identifiable abuse, but we probably can do that based on the CP round or won and lost on the margins. Lack of reciprocity denies months of research and respect for negative preparation. B, point decision making. Their impact muddles the question of what the debate is about. Failure to identify a specific point of difference dilutes the potential debate because the judge's decision becomes increasingly vague, arbitrary. Debating a well-prepared opponent is necessary to teach a process of ad construction in which all claims are held in rigorous scrutiny. That's the best impact that's portable outside of the debate. Taking arrows out of the negative's arsenal is devastating for the debate's ideological potential. Second impact, limits explosion. Our on once winning legalization bad is not a sufficient reason to vote negative. There's no way to stop topic explosion. The negative should be prepared to debate an app that says that weed prohibition has historically racialized roots and therefore that should be repealed. The negative should not be reasonably expected to win that the genealogy of drug violence in Mexico is bad, or the political imaginary that they radically imagine outside of the plan's implementation is bad. It justifies acts like psychoanalyze sexual repression within the prostitution prohibition, critique sobriety in the weed prohibition, a Foucauldian critique of risk in the context of online gaming, and analysis of bioethics in relation to Oregon, and then tacking on a plan text with no justification exactly what the 1AC did in this debate. Obviously, these are all important issues and can be used to justify legalization, but allowing them to say that it's a prior question to the plan's implementation is totally unreasonable for the neg. Their third impact is actually a sub point is their interpretation lets them pick and choose what parts of the resolution they want to defend. It trains bad actors to flee from reasoned opposition and don't have to defend particular political questions. Second is clash to the prerequisite determining if the app is true. Vote negative on presumption because their claims have not been rigorously interrogative. All of this has to be a voting issue because of app conditionality. Shifting allows them to be shifty is bad. And even if we don't extend this, if there's any point that they're not defending a plan, it should be sufficient to vote negative independently. Do have to negate most of this offense. If they truly wanted engagement, they should have disclosed, which solves all of the 2AC arguments that they made about this. This proves that they're just going after the ballot and arguing in bad faith. If they say otherwise, fairness outweighs the line by line. They do not meet proven by their answer to the counterplan where they say disproving implementation is not enough for this to win. T is not patriarchal because debate is a game. Very little of their offense applies because our argument is not policy making good or rules or jurisdiction. It's just that you have to defend a topical plan and the implementation and provisional settings for debating a well-prepared opponent. It's not patriarchal. Anderson says and limits its engagement, not exclusion. It does not. No, aff do not always have to be extra T. T version of the aff is to read the plan, but not answer 1 in CCX the way they did, since they said that disproving the plan is not sufficient for us to win, but rather we need to also disprove their method, instead defending the consequences of the plan. Otherwise, they skirt all real engagement by saying, oh, that's not what we meant. They conceded the Gallus card, which impacts this from Reichsbeck, that says this is exactly the logic that the patriarchal politicians today use when challenged on their position, because they say, oh, that's not what I meant, and then they get away with it. Lundberg, they do not turn it. There needs to be a clear impact, a point of class that's stable throughout the debate, which they clearly have not met in order for deliberative democracy to be optimal to solve gendered violence, climate change, etc. All extenders read this Bow card they read is negative evidence because it says plans are bad, so they shouldn't have included it. Them towing the line on this hurts them because it impairs the ability for utopianism to be effective. Rather, you need to do the hard political acts you work to change the world. That's Anderson. No accessibility to the law is not always patriarchal, and you can be negative state action on this topic, which answers this. Fairness is not masculine. It's just a claim that since exclusions are inevitable, those should occur along reciprocal lines. No reasonability. Their counter-interpretation is totally arbitrary and self-serving, and a tangential relationship to the topic is worse because it causes judge intervention, which means that it takes debaters out of the debater's hand.
Okay, which is 731. Yeah.
Where is this?
I don't have a copy of mine.
Yeah.
Right now, debating.
Do you prefer the Air or the Pro?
The Air is a Pro.
Air.
Well, the
Yes.
screen is a lot worse.
It's cheaper? Yeah. Yeah. I do your phone. Dude, man. Yeah, that's it. I want to work for that. Yeah, they were like, why don't you go to Alabama? Law firms. So it's like,
That's true.
what?
Like a weird thing happens. Which could be amazing.
Yeah, I guess.
Like professor contract.
Yeah, it goes Emory, George Washington, 22.
Triple 22s.
Yeah, right?
Every Dame though.
But that's just because of the alumni. Those Catholics.
Yeah.
Those Catholics.
250. Sikowski.
Awesome, thanks.
T. Right? The affirmative is not an employment strategy. It is a starting point for political solutions that are not able to be imagined within the status quo. Go to this question. This justifies the devaluation of women's bodies, which means necessary in order to value women's bodies. Our utopian feminism method is critical because it process create solutions that within the status quo. Also, we turn the result about the politics of extend the piece of string evidence, which because we imagine is not the injury politics that they discuss exist. Now they make an argument about why we should envision cis men not taking care of the women they are idolized in civil society, which of utopic politics writes away the violence that they have done to begin with, which means that it is in the scripts which is not possible in the status quo. The status quo pushes violence again because it precludes the ability to discuss the way that women have experienced violence that has been their proper efforts stage in political sphere. Women are able to take charge down with the top. Three arguments. First is impact women their SPS. Rather, we question we topical plan, but we get to determine the telos of the affirmative no to our counter-interpretation because it means that we can read any of the links that they want to the plan, but we just have a discussion about how that should be evaluated. The second is the reading framework is definitely legalized PIS in the United States for cis men, which means that this is problematic because the solution to deal with actual problems, but they misread the 1AC as not a solution to deal with that, which is problematic. They still read framework, even though we read a topical plan, which means that we can never inject feminist scholarship into law because it was always be overcoded as not predictable. Now, there's also an accessibility dyslexic in the very evidence. Their version of how we should evaluate the affirmative does not allow the possibility to create feminist jurisprudence lawmaking. Now, they say 90% they didn't answer the specific arguments about nearly all first is geography. We legalized PS in all of the United States, and nearly all modifies geography didn't answer that. No interrupt there. Additionally, we legalize all types of PAS, which means that we do legalize nearly all PAS. Now they extend the regulation argument, but their regulation card that they read on the other flow does not mean that the affirmative is not topical. The regulation is that it is PAS for all men. Their evidence literally says that in Oregon they legalized it for terminally ill patients as a regulation, which means that specifying who accesses PAS means their interpretation. Now they do get negative ground because they can question whether utopianism is good or bad and have an alternative feminist strategy, which is necessary for engaging in a feminist dialectic. This can be based in discussions of the way the PAS is operationalized, but it cannot ignore the telos of the 1AC. Now, they say limits, but you have a limited view of what potential politics are, which is problematic, so we turn your limits argument because the only way you envision politics is one that is based in patriarchal notions of dominance, which justify all the impacts that have been isolated in the first place. They say AFCONDO, we're not going to kick the plan now. New affirmatives are necessary because we must survey new literature to inject into the debate. Also, debate is competitive. Obviously, we want to win. Also, LOL, you saying we can't read new apps? New press reads new apps all the time. Additionally, there's no bright line for what that means because people will read new advantages and add-ons that we understand is offensive. It says that we need to have reasoned argumentation. This means that they always overdetermine the 1AC as something that is not reasonable, something that exists within out the bounds of reasonability because it is a form of feminist scholarship that is not able to be matched in the status quo. Now, we resolve their Lundberg evidence better because we do not retreat from the state, rather we open the possibility to create new and more creative solutions. Second. Counterpane. Feminist jurisprudence is better able to solve for the medical industry, extend the piece of hard acceptance of medicalization model, something that has been overdetermined by patriarchy and coercion because of the way that is masculine and they try to prioritize the masculine bodies. Or sarcastic evidence in the 1AC discusses the way that the fear of the feminine has been what has justified and allowed violence to exist against trans bodies. They are not able to resolve this permutation. Do both also resolves any of the reasons that their form of medical model is better because it means that people then would have the choice of whether or not they want to engage in it or not, which means that there's no impact. Also, floating pics are bad. You can't advocate the 1AC. You did not perform the utopic imagination of what the world looks like. And also the intention of reading the counterplan is not to engage in the feminist jurisprudence, which means that you have a false intention which isn't able to resolve the 1AC. Also, there's no impact to your sovereignty argument because females will be the doctors who are killing the men. You say that most men are doctors, but they die also. That's the point of PAS is the women doctors would not be coercive because of the way that our 1AC reimagines the rejection of masculinity that exists within the medical model. I don't really think that there is an impact to this argument. The medicalization model only assumes a problematic medicalization of the trans body. The 1AC does not advocate clearly defining what the body is. That's why we discuss what the cis male is, because that means that trans individuals are able to exist without the clearly mapping of medicalization that their evidence discusses. That's a strong impact. Now, onto the critique extend the delivery evidence that feminist utopian narrative is necessary because it allows for new relations between women and institutions to resolve their nuclear family argument. It specifically discusses the bourgeois family is something that women are always forced to be within, which means that our utopic politics allow for us to traverse that. Additionally, they don't explain what the alternative is. No one explanation explanation later as to how it would be able to solve the impacts over the 1AC. Now, it's not able to solve the 1AC impacts of exclusionary politics and sexual violence. He keeps saying that we need to discuss gender violence writ large, but this is problematic because we need to discuss the individual instances of how this violence is manifested. Otherwise, it just means that violence will be seen as an unfortunate if capitalism isn't able to resolve the nuclear family. Also, the ecological collapse as a result of masculine politics that view the environment as something that needs to be dominated and controlled for capitalistic purpose. The 1AC obviously rejects this form of logic. They say that women are dominant CEOs. This doesn't answer the feminist jurisprudence part, which indicates that we reject that form of logic. The permutation is necessary. It's a common question of competition through a Venn diagram. You look at where the two strategies overlap. The 1AC is not out of line with rejecting capitalist politics. In fact, it is in line with that which we said. There's no severance argument, or you should look at where the two overlap. This is necessary to create the best form of politics. We do get a permutation because not allowing permutation means that we can never come up with the best feminist strategy to deal with how violence is operationalized onto women's bodies.
All right, cap, counterblend T. Everybody good? Awesome. The critique we're not going to go over permutation, test, competition, not an advocacy. We solve the environment via the counterplan because it's able to solve the entire case and our decision-making impact, which is also mentioned in lumber. There's no net offense here that we're not able to solve. Counterplan. The counterplan tells the entire case. The question of this fate is whether the physician is a good jumping off point for the questions of killing, suspended. They have conceded an impact argument. The sovereign positions of authority inevitably evolved into violence. Repeat that even if we don't win a turns case argument on medicalization, we still have an external impact of maintaining the doctor as sovereign, which maintains the ground for violent state intervention in the name of preserving and demarcating the realms of life and death. The only answer to this is that the women would be the doctors. They have conceded the argument I made in the 2 and C that the position of authority inevitably leads to violent power relations in which a biopolitical motive determining who is worthy of life and death, which is inherent in the medical position of authority of the doctor, is inevitably recreated in the world of the affirmative. They have fundamentally dropped a sovereignty and biopower criticism, which makes it impossible for them to win because they have, given that they have zero solvency deficit on the counterplan. The 1AR did not extend the bureaucratic but focused bad arguments. You should heavily hold the line. You and our strategy predicated off of 1AR missteps. They say that they say that we have overdetermined the plan. The fear of feminine causes violence, etc. They are blind to the possibility that women and non-cis men are able to do violence. They have no explanation of why that is not true other than some romanticized notion of how those people, because they've experienced oppression, will inevitably not do violence. They've conceded the arguments I made in the 2 and C that has led to the worst forms of revolutionary puritanism in history, in which we identify enemies and we say that anything we do in opposition to those enemies is good, even if it involves slaughtering them, because we think we are pure because we have been victimized, which is the bomber evidence I read in the 2 and the C, as well as the bomber evidence that was read in the 1 and C on the case permutation. Both is a new argument of the 1AR. The 2AC explicitly said in the abstraction, which means you should not allow it. Also, choice is a facade for ideology. It maintains the power of medicalization. Our Salem evidence indicates the idea that you are criticizing the medical simultaneously turning to it the simultaneous reflexive inclusion of it, and the 1AC proves the dominance of medical power and proves that the choice will be ultimately a facade. And the permutation also severs out of the permutation to go for the permutation to counterplan obviously severs out of the inclusion of the position, which is a voting issue makes it possible to make for all of our offense. Now they say floating picks are bad. There's no explanation for why the 1AC has a possible revolution. Floating pick argument is only a contradiction if they go for bureaucratic focus. If they really
overly bureaucratic focus bad and any technical details are bad, then the inclusion of the plan is bad and you have to vote negative. Their vogue evidence, as HBC cross-examination says that it's more of a presumption argument to reject the team. If they don't win, the technocratic focus is good, will win, then the counterplan is a better jumping off point. We evaluate the debates, our going evidence indicates that during times of political decision makers are finite, political energy is finite, attention and focus are finite, which means that making decisions is necessary, which means you should hold the I think they have chosen and one of the assumptions by which they make their process in which you have zero defense or sovereignty impact. They've conceded the terms reliance upon the doctrine of being created and the first intelligibility upon which is identity. Normative identities is ultimately due to maintaining what the medical regime ultimately does. A regime of violence that they are not able to evidence that indicates trans people are the medical authority of the law and the status quo, which means the counterplan is more in line with those imaginaries and more a better utopian imaginary. They have solvency deficits. I really don't know who is going to go for. They say the one issue about medicalization, the system is a condition of possibility for access to the question is not whether the plan can fundamentally straw women we use. However, the advantage that you directly of the implementation apply the line to those who wanted our prior question. Exactly what they're trying to do on the counterplan is not a twisty argument which you should hold. It means that the legalization of the topic areas is for the entire history topic impact in and of that clashes of prerequisites. Fundamentally, the argument she's doing in bad faith that they go for anything about why debate tapes are political subject is only matters in the margins. You should not allow vote for the affirmative race of those margins of shifting, which is exactly what they've done in this debate. If it doesn't make it impossible to be negative, they're a really good team, and so a little bit of our arsenal is devastating. We spout is necessary to advocate the activated citizenry who claims for the exclusion. The affirmative makes it unclear what is the negative refuting. What is the negative refuting? Where we try to refute the telos of the 1AC by saying medicalization is bad, but they say none of that applied. Ultimately, their counter-interpretation is arbitrary because they're not saying that the telos of the plan is good, that they're saying that if the telos were ultimately enacted and then the plan were enacted, that's bad. That's why our T version of the F is use the telos to justify the plan, but the plan is used to justify the telos in this instance, which actually where negative ground is gutted. They say nearly all framework, etc. This is not framework. This is topicality. U.S. should and topicality. Nearly all they say that we exclude feminist scholarship analysis, falsely explained in the overview. They say reasonability, you're not reasonable. You've got all which is where all of our comments come from. They also concede it causes judge intervention, checkdowns, and whatever you determine that to be. They say Anderson says reason. We're not saying you're irrational. We're just saying you undermine the possibility for the negative to engage, which is ultimately antithetical to debate.
55. Yeah. are excluded from democratic proceedings through the imaginary of the plan go to topicality. The implementation of politics is impossible. This is why topical, but there is a check on all implementation that solves all of their limits arguments. That the affirmative must defend a topical plan, but they get to evaluate how that plan is. This is an aft choice argument. Politics about the pragmatism and feminist scholarship being united in the way that the government would argue. If we had said that the plan through deontology and it's unfair because they were only prepared for consequentialism. This is essentially how this interpretation functions. You should lose the definitions that you have read about how we have to defend a legalization and implementation of the plan. That's exactly what we have done. We have just said that you should view it through a utopian imaginary. This is historically how the radical feminist politics are implemented. Things like giving women the right to vote was something that was an imaginary opportunity. Ending slavery, that is imaginary utopian possibility that took a type of future thinking that opened up hope for a world that was not run and constrained by patriarchal politics, which means that the F solves the Lumberg evidence better because it creates the type of necessary prerequisite to open up possibilities to deal with things like global warming. He says that we should use analysis as a necessary way to evaluate debates. What, especially considering that the three scripted decision imagining is the way that we conceive of the world, but we will defend. And the way that you could have said that feminists achieve a different kind of utopian, come up with different strategies to the way that patriarchy structures the government. Kind of thing. External net, not misunderstood arguments. It's not about the fact that we move women to a position of doctor things, but rather that the way that patriarchy structures a piece of two-way see evidence that has historically what has happened because men and masculinity has always conceived of how decisions are made and always use a misconception about how women's bodies operate. That's why things like that women were diagnosed with things like hysteria during the early 1900s. That's because the people thought that their wombs were running all over their bodies, or why transgenderism was conceived as a disorder because it did not fit the masculine prescription of how expressions of gender should operate. These are all examples of how patriarchy has structured that coercive model, which means that we are turning all of their sovereignty biopolitical power arguments because they have ignored the way that patriarchy is intimately intertwined with how that impact operates, which means that the inclusion of the physician and focus on that is necessary because of the way that it injects a feminist jurisprudence into the medical model. That's what the plan is in terms of the way that it connects to things like the Van Meer and McKenna evidence about how the feminist political imaginary would transform the way that the law operates and how we would legislate the way that the medical industry operates, which means that the act is the only thing that solves for the way that the medical model has been a biopolitical and patriarchal apparatus, because what does the counterplan do to deal with that? Also, the perm do both. It was obviously in the 2EC and shields the link to the net benefit. This is a dropped argument from the 1AR that cis men would just choose to use non-physician assisted suicide, which means that there would be a shift in the kind of sovereignty because the permutation offers the choice between the two options. This is a dropped argument, which means that it solves all of the net benefits, and there's the risk that the app would be able to link turn the medical industry better, which is the net benefit to the permutation. Does PASing cisgender men create a static notion of queerness and identity in the context of gender? How and why would the transformation of the medical industry by using PAS to kill cisgender men mean that all of a sudden the way in which patriarchy polices gender is reinforced? This is a total disconnect arguments that he's going for in the 2NR. Things like a floating pig because it would steal the scholarship of the 1AC means that there's no feminist perspective because they have just you should view the permutation cross the affirmative policy and methodology overlaps with the negative and vote for where those intersect to find the best to patriarchy.
the negative. I thought that the framework debate actually went really well with the F. So I'll start with that. Just like this was I think you did a really excellent job of answering this. But I do think that the PAS, non-PAS counterplan, the PAS pick was not really answered very well from the beginning. And you sort of started very far behind and didn't really catch up for me. I think the problem is that it seems like there's only a risk of this net benefit, and the counterplan captures your link term pretty effectively. Since it's based off of the consistency of political advocacy with a general vision of a feminist utopia, it means that both the F and the counter, and you have to win if the counterplan is inconsistent with that vision for some reason, and that's the part I think you didn't win in this debate. So you introduced it in the 2AC kind of like your bureaucracy argument, and then you didn't extend that argument into the 2AR. So I think that's the missing component for me for you to win, that this is a disadvantage to the counterplan. So that leaves you basically with the perm resolves the entirety of the net benefit, or the feminist utopia resolves the entirety of the net benefit as your two other ways of winning, basically on affirmative presumption. I think that there's a couple of issues with that. First is they have a pretty good piece of Salem evidence that says even if we try to sort of want to transform a relationship with death, PAS is a bad place to start with it because it's fundamentally contradictory to that goal. And second, they have this Young's argument that I think needs some attention, that we have limited intellect, like finite political attention. We have to choose very carefully about where we devote it to, and that devoting any of our starting point to this medical model that is inherently sets one person above another, one person who is an expert and is the one who's allowed to make decisions for another, is violent. So I think there's like a risk of a net benefit. I do think you're winning some defense to the net benefit in that it does make some sense to me that about your arguments that if we recharacterized feminists to inject more like concern about things like sexual assault, et cetera, it would probably change at least the way that the medical industry deals with things like rape kits and stuff like that. But I don't think that you're getting to the level of dealing with the general issues of medicine, and I think that's what they're getting an impact argument. They're like external impact argument from. So I think you might address what this harness card is talking about, like the pill being pretty messed up and stuff like that. But I don't think you're capturing their external impact. I just want to say, like really quickly on the T argument, I literally don't know what the violation to this argument is by the end of the debate, because to me it seems like the neg is saying that the plan's enactment. The easiest way I think for me, the way I saw it, is that they didn't say that reading the app in advance was the advantage. They said implementing the app would be a radical intervention into our understanding of the law, and that the impact was based on injecting that radical gesture into, not like we read it, therefore advantage. So it seemed like distinct from the way you talked about it. So the violation, I think, is not correct.
Okay, that's totally reasonable. I extended that mostly just in case they tried to like go for some stuff on the
Fair
CV.
enough.
So, do you think it's possible to win a link to this argument? I guess the clearest point where I think maybe there was a link is like when they say that they would just be imaginary of all doctors as women. I mean, I guess we have to take up the case to win them.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's just an issue of solvency. I think that they're saying that if the app leads to the effective implementation of political of that feminist utopian vision, it would solve your net benefit. That's what it said to me. Like the advantage solves the impact of your net benefit.
Okay.
Case against the DA was sort of how I thought that.
So you're more persuaded by just being like, look, you haven't fiated that all women become doctors.
Like no solvency argument. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So I think you should leverage a more effective play 2NR focus more on leveraging stuff like your Salem evidence and your 1NC link argument that the position of the physician is inherently biopolitical, and using that to explain why it means feminist utopian vision doesn't get implemented, especially in the context of physician-assisted suicide.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I can go next. I don't disagree with much of that. I think kind of like the best route for the app to win is really just the link turn argument can kind of like the app's imagination overcome some of these medicalization problems. They have evidence and arguments as to why like the physician has this control. Counterplan kind of like a defense from the app is why like the physician component that's good, or you decide to the counterplan. And I think like this is good about talking about the way that women experience violence in a patriarchal medical industry. I just would be able to is not the 2NR has that like the AF kind of recognize the possibility that non-cis men could still be in sovereign, which is particularly true. I think y'all's explanation of this like in terms of the sin argument categories about that explanation, particular application of why it could potentially probably now the medical sector is basically deciding who identity category. So I just think a whole lot of it's some other questions.
Were you the same as me?
So no, I can talk about that a little bit as well. I think I'm probably not in a place where I would say I would just vote on framework. I think it does kind of like help shape kind of how I view the counterpoint stuff, and I think it was like necessary in the 2NR to kind of provide like a shield against maybe the AF kind of like recharacterizing some stuff to maybe avoid some of the stuff on the counterplan. But I guess I kind of think the extra topicality argument does make a little bit of sense given the cross-section of the 1AC where it's like, if we disprove the plan, is that sufficient to vote neg? And it's like, no. So it's like, clearly, it's like, I get that the 1AC kind of like is saying that they inject something into law and stuff, but clearly it's like, I just don't think the advantage of the 1AC is really tied to the mechanism itself. So I think all like the examples y'all are giving like in the one round makes sense. But I don't think I'm in a place where it's just like framework outweighs the AF. There's not enough time to develop that. I mean, it's like the 2NR angle is the thing.
So I agree mainly with the framework arguments. I think the AF was in a really good position on framework come the end of the debate. However, I think the AF's positioning on framework to make this less of a debate about framework hurt your capacity to make some of the best arguments I think against the counterplan. One is like your fictional utopian argument, which is the performance at the top of the 1AC that the one and the negative can never kind of encapsulate. And second, the idea that I thought maybe could have been a bigger argument in the debate was just like, you know, cisgendered men cannot advocate a feminist jurisprudence utopian from their standing and privilege as cisgendered men. And I think those two arguments, I think, the second argument not really being made in the round, but kind of like was there, present, and the first argument, which is just sort of the idea of like the fictional utopianism argument, which is the beginning of the 1AC. I think more you try to meet framework, less you were able to use those in your advantage, and I think makes it as like they don't create external DAs to the AF. So I think at the end, even if you win, the AF can resolve some of the questions of the medical industry. I think they have like another question, which is just the idea of like power structures in general should not be things that we should engage in you know, at all. And the counterplan, you know, resolves a lot of like how we engage in those power structures, especially within the medical industry. Now, if there's violence that comes from the medical industry, you may supplant a number of instances of violence that existed in the medical industry. However, I think one thing that just sort of like sits in the back of my head, and it's not like a controlling decision, but it's the idea that like no other body can commit violence, like, and other than cisgendered men. And I think the neg at least has this argument kind of floating out there, and I don't think that's a necessary truism. However, the idea is that not engaging in the medical practice and not creating a binary or a dichotomy where there is power relations that exist is one that I should not engage in. So I think that mixed with the idea that having some external offense to what the AF did that the neg can't do, access both on a level of the idea that they're both never have a fictional utopian, that they even advocate the debate, counterplan this via plan. And I think at the end it's just sort of like, if the basis is the plan to get to a feminist imaginary utopian, then I think the counterplan resolves a lot of that, and the question is just not engaging in the medical practice. So I thought that, like, maybe earlier I thought like y'all were gonna play a little bit like not take such a hard stance on like how much you'll defend the plan or not. I thought it would be much more of the fictional utopian at the top of the 1AC, and I thought there would be a much more static position by the affirmative that like the negative can never advocate the counterplan. Like, yeah, that counterplan is like a non-starter because it would never solve for the feminist utopian. And the question is not does the counterplan solve patriarchy, it's just the counterplan literally cannot engage in a feminist utopianism because you're cisgendered men. And this is a non-starter. And I thought that would be much more of a push, but I think maybe, and maybe it's because of the framework arguments that it was less of a push or less of a thing in the debate. And I think if that was more of a thing in the debate, it makes it a lot harder. But then obviously it would have shifted to a framework debate. So.
No, I do think your app has some good framework theories, like especially like your feminist jurisprudence angle gives a positive view of the law. So I think that that's a good place to position yourself as opposed to some of the other apps that you've read earlier in your kind of, I don't know, personally I think that's so hope that's worth.
For this, see, it seems to me, and this was not a huge feature of the decision, but that the net benefit is just that it prevents the coercion of men. Like, I don't understand the spillover between why, I understand like the kind of.
PS isn't coercive, first off.
Right.
So that was also
but
like really
isn't-
weird. So they made an argument that it conferred new authority on physicians, was what their evidence said. It gave physicians a new authority over the right of life and death. So that authority is bound up in a system that is inherently
Right, but wouldn't that
does
authority
violence.
just be over cisgender?
Not necessarily. So this is the part I think you need to do a better job. So they make the argument that the authority can then spill out generally to other medical practices. So it makes sense if their impact was only about PAS, or like if they read an argument about exploitation or able-bodied people, only elderly people. That would make sense. But I think given that their argument is generally conferring authority to physicians is bad, it makes. I don't think that argument really makes that much sense.
So, do you think it makes sense, or is it persuasive to say that, so they have this argument about how that authority can spill over to other regions, but that because the coercion in the medical industry or the authority is patriarchal, that the bonus jurisprudence of the act deals with that and give more examples than what was in this 2AR? Or is that?
It's a little defensive. I think it is like a potential way you could win. So that's why I was saying like an aft presumption is definitely a potential way you could win, but I think that you would definitely need more examples and to counteract the sweeping application. Given that I don't think this harness evidence is quite expansive enough.
Because I thought that was, for me, I thought the question of how do you resolve the questions of power in the medical industry, I think need to be fleshed out a lot more. I don't think the evidence speaks to like those questions, and I just sort of their spillover argument in the counter that at all, versus the plan that does shift and create power. It's just power in general. If the AF had now patriarchy is the only thing that frames all of power relations and more of a discussion, especially in the medical industry, then I think you probably could have gotten reduced it to almost zero, that there's no net benefit. But I think that they have like a sort of broad context of power and authority that exists that we shouldn't engage in. The counterclaim doesn't, so it's like a small risk of that argument. But I think that because of some of the earlier things, I think the counterclaim resolves like a lot of the questions of the affirmative. And I think that's where I thought the performative aspect of it should have been a bigger part of it, because it's impossible for them to solve that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Two questions. Or one. Given that the way the debate played out, it makes sense that framework wasn't really a thing, but if they had been going more for the arguments that Manny was talking about, like arguments that were at the top of the debate and the counterline, do you think that the arguments we were making were good or not?
I mean, I think the arguments were sufficient in this debate to create a world where those did not become an issue. So if that means that they're good enough, like, I'm not sure.
Do you think we would have won a link if they had gone the route you're talking about?
I think you want, I mean, let's just say, I think you're doing well on these arguments because I think you're doing well enough that in my mind, they did not become an issue in the debate. So I think if you were not doing very well in this argument, I think they could have become a much larger issue in the debate. That's just the way I saw the debate.
Okay, yeah, that makes
So I
sense.
guess that's as far as I could evaluate it, because I don't know like what it would look like in a world that more of the debate was about the performance and you not being able to advocate things, and what about feminist fictional utopia in terms of jurisprudence, etc. Like if the debate were to come that, I don't know like how these arguments would change, but the arguments were sufficient enough in the debate that that did not. So.
I think you should have talked a little bit more about the becoming stuff that's in their evidence. They like are reading it sort of D and G on this jurisprudence part. So like becoming seems like it doesn't have to be tied to a particular endpoint. Like it seems like you could reference that argument a little more specifically, that theory that's in there, evidence a little more specifically. But I do agree. I mean, it's like hard to evaluate this theory was sufficient, and they did focus on the early stuff.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because obviously, like, probably not knowing you're going to vote for this, but just doing this, saying this, so this could be used in a certain way later in the debate. So I mean, everything would change in a world that those things would change.
I have one more question. Do you think it's persuasive to make this argument about how reading framework is a performance of the, I guess, knee-jerk reaction to patriarchal jurisprudence, and also never seems predictable.
I thought that argument started off well at the beginning. The idea that like very fixed structure in which you have to fit in and anything outside of that is sort of like irrational and not understandable. And I thought that was going to become more of a thing throughout the debate, just sort of like a policing argument. And it was just going to be like this policing day everywhere, which is like, we're never good enough, you're positioning what our interpretation of this, and then that was going to spill over to sort of like the counterplan debate,
Yeah.
et cetera.
And it's
So it was going to become a broader framing for the debate,
Yeah.
which is that every time we say something, you tell us it's not good enough, it's not correct, it's not factual enough, it's not accurate enough, it's not this, it's not packaged in a box the way we want it, and it's like, that's the jurisprudence model that we have criticized and we've impacted in that jurisprudence model.
Yeah. It's worth it to extend just because, like, no matter what the 2 and R is, it's like offense.
Thanks for checking out. Great debate. Good luck.